Spokesman's Office. To introduce our two speakers, the first is Suela Yanina, who is the chair of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances, and our second speaker is Bernard Duhem, who is chair of the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances. So they will each make some introductory remarks, and then you'll be free to ask questions. Thank you. Ms. Yanina?
Thank you very much for the interest for the work of the committee. We have been here today with my colleague from the working group to present the annual report of the committee. The Committee on Enforced Disappearances is the youngest committee in the human rights treaty bodies. It is a monitoring mechanism of the Convention for Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. During the last year that comprises the period of reporting, the committee has made full use of all instruments that are foreseen in the Convention in order to be at the forefront of the fight against enforced disappearance and to combine its efforts with other stakeholders in order to make a stop and to finish this heinous crime, which comprises a multiple breach of human rights. The committee during this period of 1 year has taken 5 of its state parties in constructive dialogues. We have very good dialogues with state parties in order to assist them by issuing concluding observations for implementing effectively the provisions of the Convention. Unfortunately, enforced disappearance is a phenomenon which we are not seeing it in decrease. As the work of our two bodies, the working group and the committee, is showing, we are receiving continuously a growing number of requests from victims of enforced disappearance. The committee specifically is using its instrument of urgent actions, and the growing number of urgent actions we receive, now we are reaching around 600 cases, is showing that enforced disappearance is a concern, and is it a concern not only to the state parties, because nowadays we have a limited number of state parties who are members to the Convention and who can address the committee for having its instrument used, but as well as in other parts of the world. The committee indeed is linked with this legal competence because it can address cases only to the states that are party to the Convention, while the working group is covering the rest of the world. So our call today in the third committee was to maximize our forces, our efforts in order to achieve the aim of universalization of the Convention. Universalization of the Convention is a step that will ensure the effective implementation of the Convention in its full potential, being it in a search and locate of individuals that have been disappeared, be it in the preventive way of not having enforced disappeared occurring into the future, but also for the right of the victims. The committee is using all these instruments in order to have a victim-oriented approach. Other instruments that we are using in terms of our work will be the follow-up to what we have recommended to state parties. This, the next session that will be in November, we are going through a new path of our work because it's time of, during this almost 8 years of life of the committee, we are coming to a follow-up of our dialogues, and it will be Mexico which will be has been invited by the committee for a follow-up dialogue, and I'm very pleased to announce that Mexico have accepted this invitation, and during November session we'll have another constructive dialogue, hopefully with Mexico, in order to address the concluding observations that the committee issued 3 years before, the development that have occurred in the state of Mexico, some positive steps that we have seen there with the adoption of a new general law, and also the way how we can better cooperate in the procedures of urgent action mechanism. More or less, these are the main themes that we presented under the work of the committee during this year. But for us, it's very important to have a constructive engagement with member states of the UN, because obligations that are foreseen in the convention are part of the obligation of member states. If we don't see a cooperative spirit by the member states, it's going without saying that it will hamper the work that the committee and the working group is doing. We are very pleased to see that some of the member states are really very well cooperating with us, and we have made the plea to have this cooperation extended to all member states, and also to have their support for our work, because it is crucial. Beside the work of with other stakeholders, member states are really important in forging the work of our organs. And it's very important to also mention that up to now we have a very good cooperation between the working group and the committee. We are trying to have different exchanges during our sessions for specific point of interest that are common to our work. One of those which is going to be developed in the future, in the near future, will be our studies. The committee has pointed out search for and location of disappeared person as one of the elements which need further study, and during our next session we'll approve some guiding principles for states in order to help them to address this issue, which is of particular importance, because search and location of individuals that are victims of enforced disappearance is a matter of life for those victims. So we are trying to make these guidelines helpful for the state, and it goes hand in hand with the study that the working group is taking over for investigation of enforced disappearance. So I want to conclude by praising the cooperation that we have with the working group, and also looking forward to any specific point of interest by your side. If you need more information on the report that we have presented today, or specific questions about cooperation that we have with member states, I would be very pleased to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Duin? It's on.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here with my colleague, the president of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances. It again shows our good cooperation between both institutions and the coordinated efforts that we are undertaking to address this heinous crime, which is enforced or involuntary disappearances. Today we address the Third Committee of the General Assembly to point out certain elements that we had previously presented to the Human Rights Council when we submitted our annual report in September, during the Council session in September. So I will not go in all the details of this, but I'm open to address certain issues, of course, of the annual report. We also addressed more, let's say, distinct thematic issues that complement our report so far. This year we have received and transmitted 800, we have transmitted 802 cases to 42 states. 264 of these cases are cases under our urgent procedure, which means that these cases alleged an enforced disappearance which would have occurred 3 months before, maximum 3 months before the transmittal of the case, of extremely urgent cases. Of course, this is just the few cases that reach us. There are thousands of cases which do not reach us for obvious reasons. Of course, the first being the clandestine aspect of this crime, and also the threats and intimidation that accompany often these situations. As said earlier, we have expressed our concern with specific forms of enforced disappearances, as we had illustrated last year. We continue to receive allegations of a lot of allegations regarding short-term disappearances, which are often done in the context of the fight against terrorism or in order to obtain evidence and so on. Often, of course, these are accompanied by violations of the integrity of the person, both physical and psychological. And we wanted to reiterate the fact that no matter how short a disappearance is, it's a disappearance. If the detention of a person against his will is hidden, is denied by state authorities, and it's done by government agencies, it's an enforced disappearance. Another very important and worrisome element that we brought to the attention of the third committee today was the phenomenon of extraterritorial captures of individuals with or without the consent of local authorities. Of course, this is not something entirely new, but the wave of these extraterritorial disappearances are increasing and worrisome. This is, of course, illustrated by the extremely shocking and completely unacceptable case of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. We have issued a press release previously on the 9th of October calling for a full, thorough, independent, impartial, and quick investigation. That was on the 9th of October. My colleague referred to the study that is being undertaken by our working group, which will complement the work of the committee that the committee is doing on search and location of individuals. Since last year, we are doing a study on standards and policies related to investigation of enforced disappearances. We've provided for an interim report in our annual report, which I invite you to consult. While there are very important standards in international law with respect to investigation of enforced disappearances through both jurisprudence and norms such as the Declaration and the Convention, we believe that more needs to be done in terms of analyzing and understanding how states should implement their obligation to investigate. I stress the fact that it's an obligation to investigate, it's not an option, and this needs to be done thoroughly and quickly. The study will address, in particular, investigations in contexts of transitional justice. It will also address the challenges and obstacles facing individuals who are exposed to situations of particular vulnerability, including children, women, human rights defenders, indigenous and social leaders, and of course migrants, as highlighted in our last thematic study on disappearances in the context of migration in the 2017 annual report. This thematic study on investigation will of course address good practices as well as explore negative experiences, and again this will be complementary to the committee's report, and it shows again the collaboration between both our institutions. Before the assembly, we also addressed the issue of country visits. As you know, country visits are an extremely important part of our work in the working group. It allows us to be in direct contact with the concerned state authorities, as well as with victims and relatives who often don't have the opportunity to meet with us in otherwise. It's also, of course, an opportunity for us to be able to provide very specific and tailored recommendations to state authorities on measures to be adopted on enforced or involuntary, to fight against enforced or involuntary disappearances. So last